Hi there, this is Chris with Sanderson Test Prep, and welcome to the Digital SAT or Digital SAT course, if that's where you're seeing this content. And as part of the course, we are going to dive into the actual Sanderson Test Prep Digital SAT book, where we will cover content, strategy, and tips and tricks for test day and really get into the weeds of the SAT material that you'll need. But first, we want to take a look at what the digital SAT looks like. And actually, let me exit from here. So, Blue Book Exams, it's going to be this icon that we see over here on the bottom left. And when you open that up, it'll ask you to log in through your College Board login. So it's going to be the same login where you would go register for an SAT. If you haven't yet set one up, then please do. You can do that on the College Board website. And once you're logged in, I'll give you the options here to take practice tests. So I have a test in progress, but let's see if we look at it fresh. So if you click on full length practice, towards the bottom there, they'll ask you for test type. So right now, this particular app is just going to be for your digital SATs, but I would imagine that in the future, as College Board continues to go fully digital for everything, you might see additional test types on here. But for now, it's SAT that you're going to select. You're going to select the corresponding practice test. They have 4 full-length practice tests that are released, so we'll just take a peek at the first one. We're going to start over on our practice test that's in progress. Here there is an option for accommodations and supports. So if you are testing with accommodations, then you can activate that and it'll ask you the type of extended time accommodations that you have. For right now, we're going to look at it just as the regular timing, and we're really not going to do the individual questions. I'm going to scroll through so that you can see a quick sample of what kinds of questions are asked on the new digital SAT and what some of the navigation features look like. So here you hit next. They are preparing the test. This usually just takes a few seconds for it to get going. And here they give you a little overview. Says it's time just like the SAT. Talks about the place to access your scores, and it basically says if you're using any type of assistive technology to make sure that you practice that along with these practice tests to see that it integrates the way that you want it to on test day. And with that, they will go ahead and allow you to dive right into your first section. The directions will always read the same, so it's good to read these now on a practice test so that on test day you don't have to waste time reading these. It says the questions in this section address a number of important reading and writing skills. Each question includes one or more passages, which may include a table or graph. Read each passage and question carefully, and then choose the best answer to the question based on the passage or passages. All questions in this section are multiple choice with 4 answer choices. Each question has a single best answer. And then you can go ahead and dive in. So when you see this phrasing, which we're going to see here when they say which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase. So these are basically going to be your sentence completion style questions. Researchers and conservationists stress that biodiversity loss due to invasive species is blank. For example, people can take simple steps such as washing their footwear after travel to avoid introducing potentially invasive organisms into new environments. Okay, so we are looking at that context and trying to decide based on that context, do we think that biodiversity loss due to invasive species, are they presenting it as preventable, undeniable, common, or concerning? And whichever answer choice you deem to be correct based on the context, you can select, you hit next, and you can move on. And so that's just a quick sample of a sentence completion question, and we see that we have the same exact wording here in a question like question 2. And then here, question 3 is a little bit different. It says, which choice best describes the function of the second sentence in the overall structure of the text? So this would be a little bit more in line with your reading comprehension skills to understand paragraph structure. And how does sentence 2 relate to the rest of the text? And so here we can see that they're saying it explains how the work of Nance and colleagues was received by others in the field. It presents the central finding reported by Nance and colleagues. It identifies the problem that Nance and colleagues attempted to solve but did not, or it describes a serious limitation of the method used by Nance and colleagues. So here, the studies performed by Nance and colleagues, they're asking how this sentence addresses that. And we'll pick whichever answer choice we find to be the best answer, and we'll hit next on a question like that. And again, question 4 you can see is very similar. Now we have two texts, and this is also something that will be present on the digital SAT, which you've probably already seen if you've done even a paper version of an SAT or maybe last year's PSAT. You might have seen these comparative texts where they have two separate texts addressing the same kind of general topic, but maybe looking at it from different perspectives. So this will ask you to be able to compare and contrast those texts. In this case, they want to know how one particular text, text 2, would respond to the first text, to text 1. So you'll pick your best answer there. Here, this is more of a detail question, but this again falls under that reading comp umbrella. Based on the text, what is true? So again, based on the text, meaning this is going to be something detail related that they will actually state directly in the text. So again, good to know expectations for what's going to be in the text or what we have to infer or draw conclusions about on our own as we read it. Main idea question. Again, this is still going to be reading comp related, but if you look, it says the poem is addressed to a close friend, as if he were physically present. And this is a little bit unique to digital SAT because the former paper version of the SAT did not include these kinds of short poems for analysis. So there are going to be some types of text that you want to just make sure you get exposure to, since that'll be unique to this exam. Here, which would most directly support their claim, so we're looking for a piece of evidence, and evidence-based justification questions have been part of SAT previously. Here, we're asked to interpret information in a table. Again, that's something we have seen on SATs previously, so this isn't necessarily novel, just the digital SAT, but a question type of continued importance. Same thing here with what we see in the graph. And another question based on data from a table. So we're going to see those kind of tables incorporated in a variety of ways. And then here, which choice most logically completes the text? So slightly different wording here than what we might have seen on previous SATs, but the same skill, really. They want to know what can we logically conclude from the text given. Here, which choice completes the text so that conforms to the conventions of standard English. So when you start seeing this language here, when they say conforms to the conventions of standard English, that means it's time to switch on our grammar switch. Take off that reading comp hat, put on that grammar hat. But we want to start thinking about what's the correct grammar within this sentence that's going to complete that correctly. So here, is it going to be company with a comma or without? Is it going to be company that or company comma that? So a few different versions of the correct grammatical form to go in those blanks. And we'll see a few examples of this here. Conforms to the conventions of standard English, like we see right below the questions number on the right side. Conforms to the conventions of standard English, conforms to the conventions of standard English. So we get a series of our grammar questions asked back to back here. And now we're looking at some transition word questions. So this is a common question type. And again, we have seen this before. It does show up in the paper form of SAT in the writing and language use, but this is how that gets presented here. So it's a standalone sentence or paragraph, and then they're going to ask you for the appropriate transition from one sentence to the next. And we see a few of these examples here. Most logical transition, most logical transition, most logical transition. And then these last couple questions, this is unique to digital SAT. So it says on the left side here, while researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. And they give us these 4 bullet points. In 2013, archaeologists studied cat bone fragments they had found in the ruins of Quanakon, a Chinese farming village. The fragments were estimated to be 5,300 years old. A chemical analysis of the fragments revealed that the cats had consumed large amounts of grain. The grain consumption is evidence that the Quanakon cats have been domesticated. Okay, so 4 pieces of information, and then they ask which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal of whatever is stated above. So that phrasing will always be there. And in this case, it says the student wants to present the Quantico study and its conclusions. So which one talks about both the study that was performed and the conclusions to that study? And we're going to select the appropriate answer choice there. So we pick whichever one we think best answers that question, and we see the same thing here. Now they have 6 pieces of information in our notes, but a similar setup. Which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish this goal? And in this case, the goal is a little different. It says the student wants to emphasize a difference in the origins of the 2 words discussed here. Now, if we hit next when we're on the last question, you'll see that it'll open up this window where you have section 1 of module 1. You have all 27 questions. They show you what is answered, what is not answered. If you had flagged any questions for review, we see that that would show up here with a little red flag. And this allows you to navigate back through. So if you did mark a question or skip one over and you say, oh, whoops, I didn't answer number 4, you can click on it, go right back to that question. And then if you don't want to go next, 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 next a bunch of times, you can also, at the bottom of your screen here, you can, where it says question 4 of 27, you can click on that, open up that window. It shows you where you are currently, and then you can navigate around as needed. So if we wanted to jump right over to question 23, we could. You don't have to go next, next, next through every question individually. Now, once you get to that last question, and then you hit next and you bring up this review page, and you decide that you're done, they tell you in the instructions here, again, by test day, we want to have these basically memorized by doing enough practice. But it says on test day, you won't be able to move on to the next module until time expires. For these practice questions, you can click next when you're ready to move on. And that's something that I think is important to keep in mind, because if you really want an accurate test day experience, you probably shouldn't move on to the next module prematurely, because that can drastically impact the total length of time of the test, which you won't have an ability to approach differently on test days. So for our purposes here, just to show this sample of questions, we can go ahead and hit next. But if you really want a true test day experience, you should use maximum time for each section. But for our purposes, we'll go ahead and hit next. It says the module is over, all your work has been saved. You'll move on automatically in just a moment. And then they take you to module 2. And in module 2, you'll see something very similar to what you saw in module 1 as far as the practice question types are concerned. They will mirror what you'll see on test day in terms of question types. The difficulty might change though, and that is actually something that we will talk about in much greater depth in lesson 1 of our digital SAT course. So hopefully that gives you a really good sample of what you'll see in the reading and writing on test day. And in our next short video, we're going to show a sample of what the math modules are going to look like for your SAT. Thanks for watching.